Hello everyone, and welcome back on Secret in Ashes. Today we're going to talk about the very, very sad story of James Bulger. Pay attention, because today's story is truly terrifying. And believe me, this case is absolutely heartbreaking. A true crime story that could keep you awake at night, and you'll soon understand why. That said, my friends, it's time to begin. James Bulger was a 2-year-old boy, son of Denise and Ralph. They lived in Liverpool, England. On February 12, 1993, Denise went with little James to a shopping centre called New Strand, in a town just 10 minutes from Liverpool. It was a very cold morning. Denise dressed James in a red jacket, gloves, a scarf, and together they headed to the shopping centre. Once there, around 3:30 p.m., Denise decided to stop by the butcher's. James started wandering a bit inside the shop, but Denise always kept her eyes on him. She only lost sight of him for a few seconds, just the time it took to grab her wallet from her bag. In that brief moment, when she looked up, James was gone. Panic immediately set in. She ran outside, thinking James might have stepped just out of the shop, but he wasn't there. She went to the mall reception, tried several announcements, and even searched together with other people, but with no success. Not finding him anywhere, after a while she called the police. The police officers rushed to the mall and tried to question Denise, but Denise was in shock, crying nonstop, unable to speak. She just kept repeating that James would never have walked off on his own. He was a very shy and quiet child. By 5:30 p.m., the mall closed, and there was still no sign of James. Police began searching the streets with patrols, and that same night they reviewed the CCTV footage from the mall. There were 16 cameras in total, and they decided to start from the butcher's shop since they knew the exact time Denise and James were there. And indeed, they spotted him. At 3:39 p.m., James was seen leaving the butcher's. Just 1 minute later, Denise was seen running out of the shop in a panic. In that single minute, James had gone upstairs in the mall, but his mother was right. He wasn't alone. Footage showed him with 2 other boys. At 3:42, another camera captured one of the boys holding James by the hand. Together, all 3 of them left the shopping center. The next day, police held a press conference asking for the public's help. They knew James had been with 2 boys, but the camera images were too grainy to identify them. Based on what could be seen, they guessed the boys were white, maybe 13 or 14 years old. Photos were published in newspapers, and the public was urged to come forward with any information. Denise appeared often on television, pleading for help and begging whoever had James to bring him back. Her desperation, her tears, moved the entire country and beyond. She also revealed something heartbreaking. Before James, she had had another child, a baby girl who was stillborn due to complications. That loss had made her even more protective of James. Between Saturday and Sunday, or the 2 days following James's disappearance, hundreds of police officers, along with family members, searched everywhere for him. Seeing him on cameras with 2 young boys made people believe he wasn't in real danger, that they might just be playing somewhere and would bring him back soon. After all, how dangerous could 2 children really be? That's until Sunday, February 14th. The body of a small child was found on the railway tracks about 4 kilometers from the New Strand shopping center. Tragically, it was confirmed to be James. The body had been found by 2 brothers, Terence and James Riley, along with some friends. They were just kids themselves, and the trauma of that discovery scarred them for life. Their grandmother later said they were never the same again. Terence, in particular, would struggle with substance abuse as he grew older, and he blamed it on the trauma of finding James's body. But what made the trauma unbearable was the condition in which James had been found. His body had been severed in half by a passing train. Before being placed on the tracks, James had endured horrific abuse at the hands of his attackers. The details were so shocking they were hard to believe, but we'll go deeper into that later. Police announced another press conference. This was no longer a missing child case, it was a murder investigation. And the 2 boys seen with James were now prime suspects. Someone out there had to know who they were and had to come forward. Liverpool as a whole was devastated. Hundreds of people gathered to leave flowers, teddy bears, and candles in James's memory. Parents across the country were terrified. This was every parent's nightmare, losing their child in just a few seconds of distraction. In the weeks following, sales of child safety leashes skyrocketed as parents no longer wanted to let their children out of sight. There was a kind of mass hysteria. Authorities even publicly reminded people James had disappeared in just a handful of seconds. Police desperately searched for the 2 boys. On Tuesday, 2 days after James's body was found, there seemed to be a breakthrough. Around 9 p.m., a suspect was arrested. When locals saw police entering the boys' home, they immediately assumed he was the killer. An angry mob gathered outside, attacking the police car as the boy was taken away. But after interrogation, police cleared him. He was not involved. Unfortunately, his life and his family's lives were destroyed anyway. Many locals remained convinced he was guilty, threatening his family to the point that they felt unsafe. Eventually, they were forced to leave town entirely. Soon after, police received a call from a woman who wanted to remain anonymous. She said she had a friend named Susan, whose son John had a friend named Robert. The 2 boys were known to skip school often, and had skipped school the very day James disappeared. The next day, police arrested them. Their names were Robert Thompson and John Venables. At first, their identities weren't revealed, and the media referred to them only as Child A and Child B. And yes, they were only children. Both were just 10 years old. Robert Thompson lived with his mother, 2 younger brothers, and 4 older siblings in Walton, not far from where James's body was found. His parents were divorced. His father had left the family about 4 years earlier, after which his mother began drinking heavily. Just a week after her husband left, she accidentally set fire to their home. Robert had 4 older brothers who apparently bullied him a lot, and they could do it freely because there was never any adult supervision. Their mother spent all her days in bars drinking. Growing up in that environment, the 7 children began to beat and torture each other, and it became a habit. They were literally afraid of one another. John Venables' family situation was not much better. He lived with his mother and had a brother and a sister. His parents had divorced when he was 3 and shared custody of the children. Both John's brother and sister had learning disabilities and had to attend a special school. John grew up feeling neglected and was constantly teased by other classmates because of his brother's handicaps. He had met Thompson at school after they had both been held back a year. Since then, he had turned into a bully himself, but always picked on children younger than him and always in the presence of his friend. In January 1987, police were called to the Venables' home because his mother, Susan, had apparently left the children alone for a long time. She was suffering from deep depression, which had also led her to multiple suicide attempts. His father used to lock him in the house for a long period of time, where John spent the time watching horror movies. Back to the investigation, when officers went to pick up John Venables and Robert Thompson from their homes for questioning, they were shocked at how small these boys were. At Robert's home, his mother opened the door, and when Robert realized the police were there for him, he burst into tears. The police looked for the clothes seen in the CCTV images, and they noticed what appeared to be drops of blood on Robert's shoes. The blood was later attributed to James by DNA testing. On the other side, John's mother, Susan, told police that on that Friday John had come back from school with his jacket stained in blue paint. That's how she realized he had skipped classes, probably to mess around somewhere. When police asked to see the jacket, they noticed the imprint of a small blue toy car on it, very likely belonging to James. At that point, John hugged his mother, crying, "I don't want to go to prison. I didn't kill the boy, I swear." He immediately shifted all the blame onto Robert, saying it was all his friend's fault. The interrogations began, and the officers were a bit unsure how to proceed. It was the first time they had ever interrogated suspects so young. An unprecedented case. They started with Robert Thompson, with both his mother and a lawyer present. They asked if he knew the difference between truth and lies. They did the same with John, who was interrogated separately by other officers. When the questions turned to James, Robert eventually admitted that he and John had skipped school that day and gone to the Strand shopping center. He claimed they were just wandering around, portrayed himself and John as mere bystanders. He said he remembered seeing little James with his mother, but that they soon left and went home. Meanwhile, John, in his own interrogation, insisted he hadn't been to the mall with Robert at all. When investigators confronted Robert with this, he suggested that maybe John had done something bad, maybe convinced James to follow them and then lost him, but again, denied involvement. Robert remained calm, almost smug at times. When shown cameras pictures of a boy wearing the same jacket as him, he brushed it off, saying lots of people had jackets like that. When detectives pushed, telling him they believed he and John had taken James, Robert replied, "Who says? In this photo, it's John holding the boy's hand, not me." By saying this, he indirectly confirmed it was John in the images, and that James had indeed been taken. Since Robert had already admitted he was with John the whole day, he basically confirmed what investigators suspected. They had taken James. The question now was, what happened after? The next morning, during another interrogation, Robert began to reveal more. Under his mother's pressure, he eventually broke down and blamed everything on John. When his mother asked why he had gone to lay flowers for James afterward, Robert said it was because he hoped James's ghost wouldn't haunt him, only John. At one point, he even said, chillingly, that if he had wanted to kill a child, he would have chosen his younger brother because it would have been easier. Detectives also raised the most disturbing findings from the autopsy. When asked who had pulled down James's pants, Robert broke down, crying hysterically, "I'm not a pervert." Once again, he accused John. John's interrogation went very differently. From the start, he cried uncontrollably, terrified and overwhelmed. He confessed much more quickly, especially after his parents, and particularly his mother, entered the room. In front of her, sobbing, he admitted, "Yes, I killed him. Can you tell his mom I'm sorry?" The detective's reconstruction was horrifying. The boys had decided to abduct a child almost without reason. After one failed attempt, they found James. John took his hand and they walked away. Over nearly 4 kilometers, more than 30 people saw James crying, injured, dirty. But no one intervened. When the circumstances of the death became clear, the tabloids denounced the people who had seen James Bulger being dragged through the city and had not intervened as the Liverpool 38. Later emerged that many people noticed the trio, but no one stopped them, thinking they were 2 children with their little brother, even though many had noticed that James was crying. A motorcyclist said he saw the 2 boys dragging the child against his will. Other witnesses claimed that Robert kicked him in the kidneys to get him to move. When they reached an intersection, James escaped from his captors and ran into the street, but Robert caught up with him and dragged him away. Many motorcyclists noticed the child being dragged as he dug his heels in and refused to walk. In the end, the trio arrived at the railway station. Robert and John beat him, threw stones and bricks at him, smeared him with blue paint, mocked him. Thompson kicked the boy so hard in the face that his shoe left a mark, which was detected days later by forensic analysis. James kept getting up, and that only made them angrier. Eventually, they inserted batteries into his mouth and rectum, hit him with a 10 kilograms iron bar, and left him on the tracks. The autopsy revealed 10 head injuries and 42 other wounds. It was impossible to determine which blow had killed him. Afterward, the boys placed the body, still alive, on the railroad tracks, covering his head with stones to make it look like an accident. Soon after, a train ran over him, but mercifully, James was already dead. Now let's talk about the trial, which began on November 1st, 1993. Despite their age, Robert and John were tried as adults, seated separately from their parents. So both boys sat facing the jury on a raised chair to allow them to see over the bench designed for adults, flanked by 2 social workers. On November the 24th, they were found guilty, becoming the youngest convicted murderers of the 20th century in England. They received indefinite detention with a minimum of 8 years. The judge, Mr. Justice Morland, told Thompson and Venables that they had committed a crime of unparalleled evil and barbarity. In my judgment, your conduct was both cunning and very wicked. At the close of the trial, the judge lifted reporting restrictions and allowed the names of the killers to be released, saying, "I did this because the public interest overrode the interest of the defendants." There was a need for an informed public debate on crimes committed by young children. Nevertheless, they served time in secure, comfortable facilities with education, video games, and activities. In 1999, Venables and Thompson's lawyers appealed to the European Court of Human Rights, arguing that their client's trial had been unlawful because they were too young to be tried in an adult court. They complained that the atmosphere of excessive tension had made a fair trial impossible. The court ruled in their favor. Therefore, in 2001, after just 8 years, a parole board decision recommended their release on a life license at age 18. They were released with new secret identities under a witness protection-style program. The terms of their release included the following. They were not allowed to contact each other or Bulger's family, and they were prohibited from visiting the Merseyside region. Over the years, rumors spread. Nothing is known about Robert, who may have been sent abroad. But Venables was sent to prison in 2010 for breaching the terms of his license, was released on parole again in 2013, and in November 2017 was again sent to prison for possessing child pornography images on his computer. He remained in prison in 2023 after his appeals for parole were rejected. Anyway, James's father tried to make their identities public again, but the courts refused for safety reasons. To this day, their true names and faces remain unknown.